Hi, I'm Ben Merens. I'm working with Economics Wisconsin to talk about how we are teaching teachers to teach students about economics that affect us in our state, our nation, and our world. I have experience talking about economics as a host at Wisconsin Public Radio, where for 8 years I hosted a program called Econ 101 once a month. We talked about recessions and debt and deficit and how basic costs on Main Street came out of what was going on Wall Street. We hope to continue to do more of this because the lessons of economics affect everything that we do in our life if we only know what they are. I'm Ben Merens, talking with Enrique Bacalao, President and CEO of Economics Wisconsin. Enrique, appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you, Ben.
We should start out just talking about understanding the economy and why that's important. If we look at the state of affairs in the United States, is the economy doing well?
It's not doing as well as it could, and that's exactly why it's important to understand economics. It's a very anemic recovery, and it's a very mixed picture. Oftentimes, people like to do analogies like bouncing off the floor or recovery, and it gives a mental picture of something that's very clean and clear and easily measured. This recovery is a very messy affair. It's more like something emerging out of the very muddy bottom of a pond.
When we look at the national picture, what are 2 or 3 key factors you look at when it comes to recovery? What are you looking for, and what are you saying is good and bad?
Well, I would say the 3, probably the most important things you would look at would be output. In other words, how much are we producing? Employment levels, how much people are being involved in this. And then finally, the cost of capital or interest rates and cost of equity, which tell you, particularly in capital-intensive companies, exactly how easy it is to be able to recover. So what's messy and what's bad about this is that we have had a very reluctant growth in output, and it's not been driven by the normal drivers of growth in the United States. Second of all, employment has lagged behind what people would have expected at this point of the recovery. If you look at companies' performance, you see a lot of profit and cash being accumulated, but not being reinvested in capital, rather being kept in cash, and very slow in committing to make employment decisions.
I know about 2 years ago they were talking about the banks have a lot of money, corporations have a lot of money, they're not reinvesting it, and that's going to fuel the recovery and take about 2 years. Well, we're 2 years down the road, and you're saying that's still the case. Why are people not putting the money out? What are they afraid of?
Well, they're basically afraid of whether or not the demand's really there. So companies are accumulating cash, but not investing it. So there's a certain amount of corporate fear in terms of whether or not there's a steady recovery that will create demand for their products. And this is particularly the case with capital goods. So people who make machines, as opposed to people who make finished products, are very reluctant to make these commitments because it's been such a slow and messy recovery that the decision to commit and go ahead and make those investments is slow in coming.
So we're talking national picture. Let's focus down into the state of Wisconsin. If I ask you the same questions, do I get the same answers?
Very similar, because Wisconsin's a bit of a microcosm. It's very reflective of the country as a whole. It's very strong in agriculture, but it's also very strong in industry. And when you look at industry, particularly in basic industries in manufacturing and heavy goods, trucks, things like that are very much along the lines of what I was just talking about. So that you see the state reflecting the same concerns and the same developments.
And if I'm a small business owner in Wisconsin, whether I'm making widgets or plumbing supplies, or I'm a baker and I make donuts and bread, why do I care about the understanding of Wisconsin's economy or the national economy?
Well, to be able to understand who's going to be buying your goods or services and when and how quickly, you really have to understand what's driving their decisions. That's really the basic reason for it. So if you take the baker who's selling, let's say, something that is an optional product, cupcakes, let's say, that person will have to be very aware of the fact that these are discretionary expenditures that probably will lag for a while before they pick up.
If I'm the baker and I say, that sounds good, but that's too heady for me, I know who my basic customers are, and I know that a couple times a year the Cub Scouts buy a lot of cupcakes for their annual dinner, and I'm hoping I get some new customers from the street, and I talk them up and they buy a lot of cupcakes. So what do I care about GDP or employment rates or whether or not banks are lending money?
Well, you should, because apart from anything else, the decisions of whether or not you expand your bakery, whether you want to basically replace that old clunker that you have in the back as an oven that might consume less energy and allow you to make a better profit margin, that's going to require money. That's going to require a decision as to whether or not there's going to be enough demand to buy those cupcakes or whatever you're producing. So to understand the basic ebb and flows of the big world out there and how it affects the cost or availability of money is very directly relevant to you.
And if I buy into everything you just said,
Mm-hmm.
and I say, okay, starting Monday, I'm going to start learning about the economy a little bit every week, what do I do?
Well, probably the best thing to do is go back to basics. If you're an adult, there are several ways of doing this. And if you're a child, then probably the best thing to do, when I say a child, I really should say somebody who isn't in the workforce yet. So it could be an undergraduate, or it could be somebody in high school. You depend on your parents and your teachers to be able to expose you to these that sort of training.
I'm going to get to those kids in a minute because I want to talk to you about how Economics Wisconsin was formed and what you're doing. But for the adult, somebody says, well, you should read the Wall Street Journal every day. Does that do it?
Well, no, probably better if you start with something that covers the basics of economics. And the nice thing about being an adult is that when you look at these generalizations that economics deals with, they start making sense because it'll ring bells with you. Now, you can either take a course or a 1-day or 2-day course like the ones Economics Wisconsin offers, or you can tackle something a little bit more disciplined and take a basic economics textbook, like say Samuelson's book or any one of the other textbooks that are used in undergraduate in Economics 101, and work your way through it. With a little help, though, it makes a little more sense.
Which brings me to the role you have as President and CEO of Economics Wisconsin. This is an organization designed to teach the basics of economics to children and spread that information to adults to help teachers understand the economy so they can help children understand the economy.
Correct.
For a lot of teachers, let alone students, this is a scary place to go. The economy, it's a big thing. Macroeconomics, microeconomics. How do you begin to get the teachers to embrace what you teach so they can then teach it to their students?
Well, that's exactly the point, which is show them how you can teach things to children in a way that's a little more engaging and a little less intimidating. When we do this, we basically show examples of how things work. We'll tell stories. We'll actually have activities that are done in the actual classroom that illustrate different points. So, for example, you can go and teach the benefits of international trade theoretically and say, I've got a comparative advantage, you have a different comparative advantage, we're both better off if we trade. Or you can have a little exercise in class with boys and girls, and you bring, let's say, $5 or $10 gift cards, and you mix them deliberately so that the boys get stuffed cards for stores that they like and cards for stores that have no significance for them, ladies shop or whatever, and same with the girls. And you basically invite them to assign a value from 1 to 10 for, let's say, a $10 card. But what's that really worth to you? And they'll tell you, and then you add it up. And then you say, okay, you're allowed to trade them. So the boys can trade with the girls things that are girly, and the girls can trade things with the boys that are more boy-like. And then you ask them the same question again, and they assign a different value to it. Add it up, and you say, now after you've traded, you've actually had much more value than you had before. And you've illustrated a theoretical point in a very much more easily understood way. You can do the same thing with private property. Why even have private property? So you can ask them, okay, if you went out in the prairie, how easy would it be to find buffalo? How easy would it be to find cattle? Well, it turns out that you can actually brand cattle and control your cattle and protect it because it's yours. Mm-hmm. Try branding buffalo. And the point is that if you have something that is no one's property, then you have all the incentives in the world to kill as much as you can and eat or consume as much of it as you can with no regard to what implications that has, because it's no one's property.
I want to go back to the kids and
Sure.
I want to go to recess and off of the prairie for a minute. So we're on the recess yard, and Enrique has a brand new basketball the school gave him, and Ben has a baseball glove and a baseball. But Enrique's a pitcher, and Ben likes to play basketball. So when you say, Enrique, what's that basketball worth to you? You say, well, not a lot. It's brand new, but I don't play basketball. Ben, same question, same answer.
Correct.
We trade Now that ball and glove in your hand's worth a lot if you're the pitcher, and the basketball's worth a lot to me if I'm a shooting point guard. And what we've just done, without kids even knowing, is we've taught them about basic economics.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. And the difference is that what you do naturally in the schoolyard or at lunch, when I bring peanut butter sandwiches, which I hate, and you happen to have a tuna fish sandwich, which I love, and we can swap, you've put it into a broader context and say, well, that's what drives the difference between growing strawberries in Mexico during winter and selling them in Wisconsin. Something that normally you wouldn't be able to, you'd have to wait until the summer to be able to enjoy.
So we teach this to teenagers.
We teach that to teenagers. What about adults?
Well, no, before we get to adults, what's
Okay.
the benefit to a 16-year-old understanding this macroeconomic concept of value, goods and services, and trade?
It starts to make them think in a disciplined economic way. For example, you look at yourself and you say, what is it I like to do? What is it I'm good at doing? And you then basically start to realize that in deciding what career to pursue and how do you make the most of the time that you have on earth, for example, value, how do you maximize that value, is the same idea extended to yourself in everyday decisions. So that becomes a lot more relevant.
Enrique Bacalao, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me.
Thank you, Ben.
Enrique is the president and CEO of Economics Wisconsin.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to talking to you about your business, the economics that affect it, and how your business affects the economics in your community.